Hey, this is Efrem Smith, and you are in on the early episodes of this podcast. Like, I can't believe it. Like, we're just here in the early stages. You're at the beginning, so you can say you were here with me for this. And you know what? I'm just coming right out of the gate with just top-notch, powerful, innovative, impactful guests. And with me for this episode is Pastor Keith Battle. Pastor Keith
In
Battle.
the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning.
Wow.
Was
Feel
Keith
honored.
Battle.
I feel honored, man.
Yeah. Let me
be
tell you
here.
a little something about him in case you don't know. You should know, but in case you don't know, let me just run it down. Church planter. He planted Zion Church in the Washington, D.C. area. I guess I'm really supposed to say the DMV.
Yeah, that's
so
what they
that
call it,
covers
yeah.
D.C., Maryland, Virginia.
And Virginia.
You're
yeah.
on the Maryland
but
side.
not Baltimore.
But not Baltimore.
I don't
Really?
get it.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you're in Maryland, Zion Church, senior pastor.
And Virginia.
And Virginia.
Yeah, we have a location in
right.
Woodbridge.
Multiple locations. So a multi-site,
Yeah.
multi-campus church. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But also, besides being a pastor, speaks around the nation and beyond. He's an author. His latest book is called Side Chickology. So we're definitely going to talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's good.
We got to get it. When a
Yeah.
book is called Side Chickology,
Yeah.
say what?
Come on.
So if you happen to be a side chick and you just tuned in for this episode, you just decided to check out the podcast episode, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't think I was going to get talked about. Don't go away quite yet.
We got some love for
All
him,
right.
man.
And if you're not a side chick, well, you should still listen in, because a side chick might be trying to infiltrate your relationship.
Wow.
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 So,
Real
so you need to check out his book, Side Chickology. Okay, we're going to get to that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I want to start out with this conversation.
Yeah.
Because if you're in the city and you're a ministry, if you're in a large metropolitan area,
Yeah.
like you are, like I am, and you want to be a thriving, flourishing church, you have to reach the emerging generation.
Yeah, man.
And there's a lot of talk about millennials.
Yeah.
You pastor a predominantly African-American church.
Yes.
It's flourishing. It's thriving. A few years ago, there was a lot of talk about the church losing millennials.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, I wondered if some of that conversation was really data focused in a white suburban church context. So, I wondered about the question, is the black church losing millennials? I don't think that's the case for you. So I just want to get your thoughts on, one, collectively, is the black church losing a generation? Two, I'd like you to talk specifically about your church and why you are one of those churches that doesn't seem to be the issue. The emerging generation of African Americans in your area love your church. So give your thoughts about that.
Well, we pay them to come. That's it. Just have a budget for them.
No, so instead of a cover charge, it's a come in here.
Absolutely.
Your fee.
Well, yeah, fee.
They get.
Absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, there's an exodus of youth and young adults and the emerging generation, millennials, as you described them. And I think there's several reasons why it's happening. And I think if we're conscious of it, right? First, we got to be aware. We can't act like it's not happening. Yeah. And we are aware of some of the reasons that's causing it. I think churches can curtail the exodus of millennials, black millennials from the church, because I do believe it's happening, and I see it. I see it often. And I would say, basically, to me, there are 5 general things that impact this issue. And one of them, I don't know if we want to talk through each one of them, but one of them is relationships, right? Because if a person feels a sense of connection in an environment, they're less likely to leave. Yeah. But if I don't feel like I have a relationship, I'm not committed to staying anywhere. But anytime people are vitally connected to a church, even a church where ministry quality is not very high, the preaching may not be very impressive, the music may be average or above average or whatever. When there are rock solid relationships, people tend to stay in those kind of environments. So what a church should do, what I think the church should do is create space and time for connection with millennials.
Yeah.
And that space and time needs to be both structured and organic. In other words, it needs to be organic, right? Like we just create the space and the time. So facilities and creative space. Like you don't want to have the young adult meeting or the millennial meeting in the sanctuary on the pews with the stained glass around. But can we create space that is trendy enough and attractive enough where it'll be the kind of space where they want to hang out?
Yeah.
And where the conversations aren't always controlled by the adults or by the brass of the organization. So there needs to be that kind of organic, but it also needs to be structured in such a way that it has the endorsement of the church so that we have it on the calendar. Hey, it's announced. There's resources going into it. If there needs to be refreshments, and we make sure we have Wi-Fi in that area, or we have the flat screens, or however it's designed. I think that's a very important piece, the relationship piece. The second thing that I think is very important, and these are not in any particular order, but as I was thinking of them as we had this conversation earlier, I think the second thing that's important is relevance. Mm. The question becomes, why do I come here? What does this have to do with my life? And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get enough money to Uber back and forth to class, or I'm trying to figure out how to find my way in this world. And it seems like much of what's being discussed here is not practical. I think when there's preaching and teaching that's not practical and helpful, like how do you get out of debt? Or how do you start your own business? Or how do you build a healthy relationship? Or how do you get along with your parents? Like subjects that we don't typically, there's not in the book of Romans, like the series on Romans.
Yeah.
Like, do I really care?
Yeah. So instead of preaching on the third dimension of anointing,
yes,
somebody's going to say the third dimension of anointing.
The anointment.
Could you just talk about paying 3 bills? How about a sermon on that?
Yeah. How about family continuity? How to overcome trauma and abuse or neglect or whatever. Like the stuff that's not in our hermeneutical plan, like in our homiletical plan, because we tend to have like this journey through the scriptures that, all scripture is inspired by God. I like what Andy Stanley says, but all of it's not applicable. Like, so if we're going through Chronicles because we want people to understand what the genealogies were all about, then that's cool. That's cool for a class of people who want that information. Typically, the people we're talking about in this podcast are not interested in that. Another one is realness. So these are R's, right? So you got relationships, you got relevance. Realness has to do with authenticity. And it has to do with the fact that people are no longer cool with preachers who hide behind robes and cassocks. You can't hide behind a biblical passage.
I forgot what a cassock was.
Yeah, that's one of those.
The real nice robe.
Yeah, the real nice ones, the button
with
down,
glitter and stuff
all
on
the
it.
way, and it kind of flares out. It's fitted and all that,
Yeah.
So
priestly garments.
Yeah, vestments. But you can't hide behind that. People want to know what's going on with your lesson, but also with your life.
Yeah.
Like if there's not real expression of brokenness and failure from us, then we come across as not being authentic. And I think that's also something that people are not going to go for anymore. You can't just present Bible stories.
Yeah, I noticed that about you in terms of, we're doing this episode with you because you're here in town in Sacramento. You preached at our church this weekend, and I just noticed that you are a transparent pastor. In your sermons, you're using scripture. You're talking about God, but you bear your own soul in sermons. And do you feel that is one of the reasons why you're able to reach the emerging generation is because they want that kind of authenticity, transparency from the person giving the sermon?
Real to them is one of the that's like up there, like Chick-fil-A. There's certain staples, and I think there's a generation of young people who want to be in a place that's real. And when I say real, I mean authenticity from the platform.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure that the pastors that I had growing up were human. I just didn't know it. And there was nothing in their preaching that revealed their humanity. They just kind of talked about David and Bathsheba. Well, not Bathsheba. They talked about David and Daniel in the lion's den and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And won't he do it? Their focus was on others and God, others and God. And the same God that did it for them will do it for you. But everything was the Word, God, you. The Word, God, you. If you would just do this and you would do this, if you do this. But there was never any introduction from, will you please unzip that jacket and tell us, show. Remember Thomas when he heard that Jesus was looking for him after the resurrection?
Yeah.
And they said, Thomas, we saw him. He said, what do you mean? I won't believe it until I touch his wounds. I need to feel what he's been through.
Yeah.
Now check this out. Jesus, according to Scripture, that was on a Sunday when he came. He rose on a Sunday, right? Yeah. So if you count the Sunday that he got, so he died on Friday. He rose on Sunday. So the following Sunday, when he comes into this, when he walks through that wall, and Thomas is not there, it's already been almost 10 days. So his wounds from the cross have had a chance to scab and have some level of closure. Like he's not hemorrhaging when he walks out.
Yeah.
He lets Thomas put his finger back into the wound to re-injure himself to make sure he knows this is real. So what we've done is we cover everything we've survived. So it becomes our private story for just our families. But there's some Thomases out there that says, I need to know what you've been through. I need to know what you survived. And I need access to your wounds so that I can believe. Because he said, blessed are you who believe and didn't see. But when Thomas saw that, he said, my Lord, my God. Before he touched the wounds, he had nothing to say. So I think people need to know that our faith has worked in the fire, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Them walking around, and if they had just walked through the fire and out of it in 10 seconds, that would have been a miracle. Man, y'all walked through that and didn't get burned? But the fact that they were walking around in it with Jesus shows that God is a sustainer in difficulty for the people who are watching. I think that's a very important thing. So
that's so good, because, that's why outside of the sin factor, which I don't want to downplay it all, when pastors fall, when there's some scandal with a pastor, I think the reason it's so shocking and so brutal to the soul of people in the church is because that pastor all along had not been transparent, had not been real about their own life. And so you kind of have this myth about the pastor. I mean, there are large church pastors that I almost, when I was a young pastor, I felt like guilty that I was like, why can't I attain this stature, this character, this maturity, it was like these were supermen that I was looking at, in the case, because when I was growing up, it was a little later on that I saw women preaching, but as a man looking to men for role models, I saw these men that just seemed so larger than life, and that they just, sin couldn't penetrate them, and then all of a sudden they're on cocaine? Oh man, they were taking other women on cruises. Oh, they were embezzling money. Oh man. Yeah. And it's almost maybe by pastors being transparent, it's not just a blessing to the listeners, but it's a level of accountability and maybe even protection, along with some other things for them. Yeah. To just say and so I used to be scared to preach like this, but I found liberation lately in sharing my own frailty, doubts, struggles. And I used to be real scared to go, okay, I'm preaching on the insecurities of Saul. Should I talk about my own insecurities? I'm dealing with...
Because it's so easy to talk about Saul, right? He's not here to, look at Saul. Yeah, he's not here to defend himself. Look at this weak sucker. He hiding in the stuff. He's supposed to be out there being the king, and he's
So I found that it's liberating for me to be able to place myself in the story so that the congregation can place themselves in the story.
when I was in counseling, when you said this, it reminded me of this one time regarding some childhood pain that I was dealing with, and that manifests itself in adult life, which is the case more often than not. And two of the people who were mentoring me through the process told me, I want you to think about your mother, and I want you to call her Carol, right? Which is my mother's first name. Mm-hmm. Now, my mother was 78 years old when she died in 2016. And they both said, in different settings, two people said, when you talk about your mother, I want you to call her Carol. And these were white men. I'm like, man, you don't understand. My mother dead, and I won't call her Carol. I think she'll come back and slap my mom. Even if I was a stranger,
I told you,
Miss Carol.
Right.
If I was a stranger,
right?
We just didn't call adults by their first name. Here's what they were trying to do. When you call somebody mom or mother, father, mom, dad, is almost up there with God. They're almost deistic to us in the sense that they have a very high role in our life. But when you understand that your mother was Carol and your father was Mac, what it does is it humanizes them. Mm. And then you begin to understand that Carol was once a little girl and she was a teen mom. And she grew up in a family of dysfunction. And she raised you without your dad. And she did the best she could.
Yeah.
And she had cancer. And she was trying to raise two sons in the hood. That's what Carol was up against. And what it did was it got me in touch with her and her pain instead of just looking at what she didn't give me. And I never felt nurtured. And she never sat me on her lap and held me and told me I was special, right? I would hear her brag to other people, but she never looked at me and told me I was special until she got much older. But when I saw Carol, I had compassion on her. But when I only saw her as mom, I felt like she let me down. Yeah. You see? Now, the point to preachers, I've been taught, because I come out of traditional black church experience, you don't call a pastor by his first name. His name's not Efrem. That's Pastor Smith.
Yeah.
That's not Bob. That's Pastor Balin. That's not Keith. That's Pastor Battle. But interestingly enough, when it's Efrem, I can handle his humanity more than when he is bishop, prophet, apostle. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's good.
The office
all right,
itself.
I changed my mind now. I was going to have the staff start calling me Reverend Dr. Smith, but I won't now.
I think you should. I think you should, because you're on another level. But isn't that interesting? Like we give people permission to be human who've been called to an office. The call to the office didn't change who I was.
Yeah.
I'm just fulfilling an assignment. Yeah. No different than the person who runs for governor or who decides to be a firefighter or who decides to be a school teacher. Like, not decides, but feels that as part of their life assignment. Like, this is our life assignment to serve in the local church, to be spiritual leaders in the local church. But it doesn't in any way lessen the fact that we're just Efrem and Keith at the end of the day.
I like it.
And that really, really was difficult for me, but was so liberating for me. And I agree. I think we do. It never excuses sin. We're not up here trying to say we have a right to sin. It just explains it. Like for somebody who's confused, whose faith was shattered because the pastor was on cocaine, or the pastor took some woman on a cruise, or the pastor embezzled money. When you realize his humanity, that was Dave. That wasn't Apostle Jackson. That was Dave who did that. And Dave grew up in a poor family in Michigan. He worked on a farm. He worked his way through college, had student loans up to his eyeballs. He committed his life to Christ in the Jesus movement. He had a fiery relationship with God. He had an alcoholic father who beat him. Now when you start getting context, now the humanity comes out, and now we give him grace, because there's only one Lord. There's only one God. There's only one Holy Spirit. There's only one Jesus. And then there's us. And that's all of us who are broken, who are trying to serve him.
Yeah. Now, here's the problem when you got two people on a podcast and they both have ADHD. Because I think are we on number 4 now?
We're on number 4.
5. Okay.
No,
so your condition might not be as bad as mine, because I couldn't even remember.
Well, I got it on this phone, right?
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
It was relationships.
Yes.
Relevance. Realness. Relocation. When a young person goes off to college, or they go away to the military, or their job moves them. There is still in the black church this sense of allegiance to my home church,
Yeah.
right? And so they don't always feel comfortable going to a new church because my roots are here. So one of the things that I think churches can do to help circumvent them not going to church at all, because it's not my home church, and I go to such and such a church back home in Sacramento, and this is not like my home church, and I feel like, is have online church. I know it's not ideal, but it gives them at least a virtual way of connecting. Hey, all y'all, hit us up, jump in the chat room, because they live in that space.
Yeah.
And it allows people a virtual way of remaining connected to their church, even though they're not physically there. And then the last thing, which is my last R, is the word rule.
Yeah.
I think we've got to have ways to put millennials, the emerging generation, at the table of decision. They have to have a voice where directional decisions. Yeah. I don't just mean, are we going to have Kurt Franklin or Ty Tribbett? Yeah. I'm talking about directional decisions. Hey, we're thinking about moving in this direction. We're thinking about starting this program. We're thinking about making these kind of hires. What do you think? And valuing their voice. Because to ignore their voice, when you think about it, would be analogous to you and I. Let's just say there's a group of people out there that want to create man caves for people 48 to 55. Black men 48 to 55. So that's for us, right? And they want to put together this man cave, and they want the man cave to be so dope that we would never want to leave it. But they never come to us to say what to put in it. Because you don't want us to leave, let me tell you what you got to have in there. Because we know what furniture we want to have. We know what books we want to have. We know what kind of entertainment system. We want to know what the remote should be able to take us to the bathroom and everything, right? I mean, we know what we want in there. If this is going to be home for us, like we're going to be in there a lot of time. But imagine the people that are designing it are somewhere between 78 to 85 years old. Mm. And they're designing it without our input. That is, to me, it's not apples and apples. But think about this: we're in our late 40s, early 50s in that space, and we're designing ministry and programming that people 18 to 25 are either going to leave later or now. But we haven't even gone to them and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" It's interesting because we serve so many people, such a broad spectrum of people, and our financial base is usually people in their 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, 60s, that their voice doesn't matter as much because their wallet is not as impactful. But if we're talking about having a church that can be sustained for the next 50, 100, and 150 years, if we don't include them in a place of rulership, that means that when we made a decision, there were millennials at the table to help guide our thinking. Even if we had to give them wisdom, practical wisdom to go with because they know everything. So knowledge, we can't keep up with their knowledge, but what we have is wisdom. Well, here's why we may not want to do that. You understand?
Yeah.
But why are they not at the table? And whenever I look at boardrooms and I look at leadership tables, what I see, the lack of diversity is not just gendered and it's not racial, it's age.
Yeah.
And so we have started, I told my team, we have to have young 20-somethings at the table of decision. I don't just mean on staff, because we hire them to work with the kids, and we hire them to work in the youth department, and we'll hire them to be admin assistants or what's the new thing now, interns.
Yeah.
No, the table of decision. So when the decision makers are at the table, is there not a 21-year-old who's thinking we need to have access to for this? I think that's very important.
That's good. Now I'm going to make a hard turn. Here's
Whiplash.
It's getting ready to come. This hard turn going from talking about millennials and reaching them in the church. That was great stuff. Those R's, or my grandma would say those auras.
Auras.
Those aura words. And so now we're going to talk about the book, Side Chickology.
Yeah.
So we are in this culture now, from Love and Hip Hop to The Bachelor to The Bachelorette to, and then you got TV shows like Ambition and Have and Have Nots. The somebody on the side, like it seems like adultery is like it seems to be such a core deal now in just about any show that you watch that has high ratings. But yet, outside of the television
Right.
affairs, the movie theater affairs, lack of commitment, the walking away from commitment, having a side chick, or you have one for fellas too.
Side slick.
A side slick,
Yeah.
is actually really devastating people. And so let me start by just saying, why'd you write the book in the first place? What was stirring in you to write this book?
Well, first of all, my own experience. I never spoke about my sin of infidelity from a place of weakness. When I shared it, it was from a place of strength, from a place where I had recovered from it, got counseling. My wife and I had been restored, strengthened, rebuilt an amazing marriage. So I wasn't bringing this to the table from a broken place, like, hey, we can't make it out here. I went through a journey where I found out, hey, there's a way to avoid this, a way to recover from it, and a way to understand what may be causing it. Because what I wanted to know was the science behind it. Like, is there a pattern? And what I started seeing is that whenever there's infidelity, there's this consistent pattern over and over again in every situation. And some people don't go all the way to a sexual intercourse, but there's always this pattern where there's a breach of integrity, whether it's flirting or porn or something moving in a direction, like what some people call marijuana a gateway drug, and that it's you start there and then you end up on something else. And I'm not necessarily agreeing with that. I'm just saying there are people who believe that. And so there are gateway behaviors that can lead to full-blown affairs. But what we don't pay attention to is the cause, right? So I wanted to understand. I wrote the book because I wanted people to understand, here are the whys behind it. And once you understand why it happens, here's how you can avoid it. Here's how you can protect and create boundaries. And here's how you can restore things and recover from it and actually have a better relationship on the back end. And to your point about Hollywood is masterful at showing the pleasure of infidelity, but never the consequences of it. And so what I'm saying is, Hollywood, let's show the child of an affair go through academic challenges in schools, fighting at school because their dad's not there, the mental health challenges of feeling abandoned, the challenges of going through Christmas not knowing whose house we have to go over, and all of the dysfunction, the lost connection with their grandparents. One side of the family is often impacted negatively more so than the other side. So now you can have an entire wall of cutoff. If the mother decides, well, I'm going back to North Carolina, and you left us, so we're not going to stay here. I mean, the damage is almost incalculable that happens with one person crossing the line of affair. And I write a whole chapter. Actually, I write 2 chapters called "The Price is Way Too High," and I didn't expect all of this. Like Ravi Zacharias, I think, is the one who says sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. We never were expecting that bill. Like. And I'm saying, for me, I understand now, adultery is not in my budget. Wow. It's just a check. I can't cover it, you know? And because what matters to me more than my own pleasure is my family, my own happiness. Because I really believe that I had gotten close to somebody that I thought would be a better wife for me. It wasn't like I was just out there, like, just cutting up. Like, I got close to somebody emotionally. And I felt like this would make me a happier human being because my relationship with my wife was so poor. But when I what is valuable, when you make a legacy decision is more important than a happiness decision. And that's difficult in a country where 3 of our inalienable rights is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
In this country, that's a right. That's like, I deserve to be happy. That's why people say, I'm going to do me. Well, why you doing you? You're doing your kids. You're doing your community. Because it's hard to hold your head high in environments of integrity when you walked away from your family. And we need men who are standing up right. But it's a level of shame that's connected to having a side chick or leaving your family that actually silences the very men we need to speak for us at injustice spaces, in all kinds of spaces. The impact it has on our culture, we don't even understand. Because while a man should be on the front line speaking up about things that matter to the community, he's in the cut trying to get something or hiding, can't be seen. And, it's so many layers to it. I can just talk about it.
So I've started to dive into the book, and so there's a couple of thoughts that I had. One was just reflecting on my own life of moments where Denisha and I have talked about. There was a moment in our marriage where we were starting to contemplate, well, what would life be like if I wasn't with him? And I was like, well, what would my life be like if I wasn't with her?
Right.
And one of the ways that my mind started to drift in that moment was, well, if I was with this sister right here, she would understand me being in ministry more. Like, man, I feel like that woman over there, she really knows how to stand by her husband pastor. Or this woman over here, it's like, man, it seems like she's just got this confidence in ministry of what she wants to do and blah blah blah. And that's where I felt like all of a sudden there was this door that was being opened. And was I going to peek through it, or even going beyond peeking through it and open it up and walk through it?
Yes, sir.
So, so I was reflecting on that, like, where is it that a man has to put up the red flag? Like, it's got to come before. I'm thinking, I mean, if you walk through the door and you in the room and you saying, "Oh Lord, how did I get in here?"
You did. Stick a fork in him.
So if as you counsel men, as you talk to them, where are the places where you say, this is where you should be concerned? This is where you should, throw up the red flag and go, wait a minute, this is trouble.
So I'm glad you used red flag, because here's how good God is. Because God knows where we're going and he knows what we're going after, he is so good, he always puts in stop signs and red lights. So no man can say, how did I get here, like that he's walked in the door, because there were always attempts to stop him. And for example, when David decided one day that he was going to stay home and not go to war, he didn't have on his agenda that day, I'm going to have an affair. He just didn't go to work, right? So he took off work. So he takes a nap. He's up on the roof, and he sees a woman bathing herself. And I don't know if he went and got some binoculars to take a closer look, but his Bathsheba, no pun intended, Bathsheba is out there bathing herself in her own courtyard. And as he sees it, now Ecclesiastes says, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, which means that because you only have three enemies, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, the lust of the eyes will never allow us to stop with just seeing. You see a car you like, the next step is, how can I get it? Like, we don't, the thing we desire. So he's looking. So he says to his staff, who's that? Right?
Yes.
Go find out who that is. Google search her. Find out who that is. They come back and they say, here's stop sign. That's Uriah's wife. And that's, they named her dad too, whose name escapes me right now. Both Uriah the Hittite and the lady's dad were a part of 30 men who were in David's top army group, his top soldiers. These are two of the 30 most important men in your entire military. It's one of their wives. It's one of them that's her husband, and the other one is her father. You can't, David.
Wow.
You got that, sir?
Yeah.
She's married, and she's not just married to anybody. She's married to one of your top soldiers, and she's the daughter of one of your cabinet members in the military as well. That's a stop sign.
Yeah.
That's two stop signs.
Yeah, that's two red flags right
Two
there.
stop signs right there, right? David said, go get her. You gonna run that? You're just gonna run that. So now, and you're gonna involve other people. And what I'm saying is, when we're in a situation where Oh, by the way, and Ahithophel was her grandfather. He was one of David's cabinet members. She had her connection to his circle should have stopped him. There were three things that should have stopped him. I write
I
about in the
mean,
book.
no was just echoing all around. No,
Don't do that.
no,
Don't do
no.
that. And some men who are peeking through the door, their phone rings and their daughter comes in the room or something, says, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And I wasn't doing anything. And he just cuts the phone off, but he was FaceTiming a side chick. I mean, most people get caught, almost. Hey, that was a close call. That was somebody from my church that saw me walk in this hotel. And that's God. Say, don't do this. Yeah. Don't do this. Don't do this. You go in the bar, and all of a sudden they're playing gospel or whatever. Like there's always, God always gives a stop sign, a warning sign. So we have to respect those and say, thank you, Lord, for that warning. Thank you for that warning. But sometimes when you have a made-up mind, the challenge with infidelity is most men, before they act, who are men of character, have strategized a plan by which they're going to execute this move without detection. Rarely is the man recklessly walking into something with just this flippant, almost impulsivity. It is calculated. He's played the game. He's had the conversations. Because you have to groom a relationship up to immorality. Infidelity is nurtured through conversations. So he has been strategically conversing or planning conversations that have lead-in questions. Tommy Nelson of Denton Bible Church calls it playing tennis. And so a man will strategize, how can I throw out a hint to this lady, and the hint be flirtatious enough that she knows that she can throw me something back to know if she's available to go in that direction, but it's generic enough that if it's misunderstood, I can play it off like I didn't mean that. It's strategic. No man who has a lot of risk hasn't strategized. It's like robbing a bank. Anybody's got a bank heist. You think they haven't rolled by that bank a number of times? Look at the measurements of the bank. Where's the money? Or a heist, a jewelry heist. Walk through the jewelry store, measure the glass, find out what kind of glass it is, time the alarm, how fast can the police get here? All of that has been strategically. Some crimes are planned out over 2 years. Yeah. This is a crime. This is a crime about to be committed. It's strategic. Yeah. And every man that goes there who has integrity and has a lot to lose has already thought through how he's going to get away with it. So the combination of thinking through strategically.
Could it be then when you see these men that are crying, whether they're politicians or pastors, and I have sinned, what they're really crying is, I have been caught.
Absolutely.
My plan has been foiled.
Absolutely.
That, in some way deep in the soul, that's what you're really crying, saying, I thought I had this great, just fail-proof strategy, and it was foiled.
I think it could be that. But the loss is painful. Yeah. When you're standing in a press conference and you have to step down from your post, because think about this, Pastor Efrem. When you're the governor or the senator of a state, you're a public servant. You've given your life to create policies that have the best interests of people. You have fought for programs for kids. You fought for money for education. You fought for justice, or whatever it is you fought for. You've given your life to this work. And to have it all taken away from you, and you can no longer serve the people that you swore by an oath that you would serve, and your family's shattered, and your children are embarrassed, and you're standing there, it can hit you. To me, that's not an act. They're really genuinely devastated, because where do you go now? Where does Matt Lauer go to get a job? $28 million. A year, annual salary. Where do you go now? Who picks up the guy who had a sexual addiction issue, who was a pervert, considered a pervert? And very few people are looking at the root causes of it. What made Matt? Maybe he was just a short guy who never had a girlfriend in high school. But as soon as he started making $28 million, he's like, y'all know I deserve this. So I'm gonna get every tall chick that I couldn't get now. We don't know. Yeah. Because who's doing the investigative work on a soul level to get to the cause behind it? And I think when somebody's there and they're breaking down and bawling, It's genuinely. I know when I went to my church and I cried in front of the church when I talked about some of the things that I had done. The reason why I cried was not because I got caught. I cried because of the people I hurt. I realized my choices had hurt a lot of people, and that made me cry. And because you never whenever see, infidelity is not an attempt to hurt anybody. That's what people don't understand. Infidelity is not an attempt to hurt anybody. It's only an attempt to help me. I just want some pleasure, right? That's why we get mad at people. If you got a child or you got a young person in your family and they keep getting high, and we don't like the way the weed smells, we don't like the way alcohol smells. And I'm telling you, when that person goes to have a drink or they go to have a smoke, they're not trying to hurt anybody. They're just trying to medicate their own pain. And most people who are cheating are not saying, I did this to devastate
that's
everybody.
so powerful. You know, I listen to all kinds of music, and I have to admit, sometimes so-called secular music speaks to me louder and more deeply than Christian music. Can I say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's this there's this song by Raphael Sadiq right now. I think the chorus is "Something Keeps Calling Me." That's the name of the song. Something keeps calling me, and the reason I'm really caught up in this song right now is so he's got the whole album is going to come out, I believe, in a few months from us doing this episode, and it's the story of a brother of his that he lost to drug addiction, and so the song. Something Keeps Calling Me. It's basically this story. It's just every time I listen to the song, it's like my eyes tear up. Yeah. It really hits my soul because he's basically saying, you know, my wife is telling me this is what could happen. My kids are telling me. He says, there's one verse, he says, the pastor it told me. But then it gets to the chorus, but something keeps calling me.
Yeah. That's
strong.
Isn't it?
The weight of it
Yeah.
is on me, and basically, and so you could listen to it at first and think, "Oh, that's drug addiction," but it could be anything. It could be the weight, the intoxication of an affair. It could be alcohol. It could be gambling. It could be drugs. There's so many things that it's like if we don't tend well to the soul, and I know for me. And
the deeper the pain, the darker the behavior.
Yeah, and I know for me that two things. One, you probably have this similar deal because we've talked enough that I think this is true. It's like I grew up in an African American culture where there's high regard and deference for your elders, no matter what.
Sure.
So no matter how your grandparents or your great uncles and aunties or your parents or the pastor is living, you don't say nothing about it. You don't
respect your elders.
Like millennials are different today. They'll go off on a pastor. They'll cuss a pastor out.
Absolutely.
They'll yell at you in the street. They don't care.
Talk about you on social media.
Yeah. But like for me, it was like this high respect and regard for elders. But it was also like we didn't talk about stuff. So it's like for me, it was such a difficult hurdle for me to go, I need spaces, friendships. I need elder. I need places I can go and bare my soul and unpack things and talk about things that the older generation of my people, at least in the context of where I grew up, wouldn't talk about.
Yeah.
Wouldn't say. I mean, it was like there were conversations that maybe I wanted to have with older black people, and I was like, well, I can't have that conversation because they're gonna say we don't talk about that.
Right.
You just be a man, just deal with it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. I'm dealing with it. And I found out I got to a place in my life where I couldn't do that. I couldn't just deal with it. I couldn't just. I didn't know where to
Not
go and just
successfully anyway.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't. For me, I couldn't just sit down and have some Cavassier and just get past it.
Right.
I couldn't just go smoke, and get past it. It was like I needed like healing. I needed to grow. And I got to a place where like it's not just I'm dependent. My marriage is dependent on this. I can't raise my daughters well if I don't do this. But I think I mean, we're two men talking, so we can just put it in the context of men. I just think men have to get to a place where they can answer, what is that that's calling you, that could destroy your marriage, that could separate you from your children, that could cause you to lose your job, that could separate you from your purpose, that could keep you from discovering God's purpose for your life.
Yeah.
And are we willing to get to the core, to the root? Because at the end of the day, it's not really the drugs or the affair or the gambling. It's something else.
Right.
Whatever the addiction, whatever that thing is calling you in the middle of the night,
Right.
whatever that thing is that puts a funny feeling in your stomach, but you like, but I'm still going to go there anyway. Even though I got a funny feeling in my tummy,
Right.
I'm still going to move forward with this. And so I'm really hoping that just, I hope everybody buys your book, but I really hope men buy this book if they don't have it. As we're getting ready to come to a close here on this episode, I highly encourage you, if you are in the DMV and you don't have a church home, you need to check out one of these Zion Church campuses. If you are outside the DMV, you can actually encounter their church virtually by going to the website. So you Google, you anything you want to throw out there about how
Zion
people
Church Online.
So Zion Church Online, you need to check this out. But I highly encourage you to pick up the book Side Chickology by Keith Battle. It will bless your life. Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate you,
for
man.
being on this episode,
My
man.
man,
You know,
man.
you don't know how you helping my street cred.
What's it called? In the beginning.
In the beginning.
In the beginning episodes.
Beginning.
Yeah.
All right. So there you have it. And there are more episodes coming at you. So just stay tuned and see what will happen.